Sustainable fashion.
Sustainable fashion.
Sustainable fashion.
Sustainable fashion.
Fashion sustainability.
The fashion industry is one of the most polluting factors to our environment. This has led to the rise of sustainable fashion. This means that fashion is made using ethically sourced materials. According to Dr. Brisma of Green Strategy, he defines sustainable fashion as clothing, shoes and accessories that are manufactured, marketed and used in the most sustainable manner possible, taking into account both environmental and socio-economic aspects. In practice, this implies continuous work to improve all stages of the product's life cycle, from design, raw material production, manufacturing, transport, storage, marketing and final sale, to use, reuse, repair, remake and recycling of the product's nick components.
My name's Emmeline Child. I'm the Programme Leader for Fashion and Textiles here at the University of Northampton. And then alongside that, I've been doing a PhD in Sustainable Fashion at UAL. Sustainability in fashion is a growing market. The statistics suggest that it's been growing year on year since 2010, according to the Ethical Consumerism Report. So it is a real growth market. It's encompassing of many different things. So sustainable fashion can be using organics, it can be using fair trade, it can be using alternative fabrics. It's also looking at topics like remanufacture, remake, repair, slow fashion, the concept of not buying and not discarding. And then we've also got lots of sustainable materials that are emerging within the industry. So we've got things like leathers made of pineapple skins, mushrooms, all sorts of different chemical processes, things like growing materials from green tea to create a biodegradable material.
You are doing your PhD in fashion sustainability.
Yeah.
What drew you towards this?
Yeah.
What do you hope to achieve out?
In 2003, I set up a label called Emmeline for Rhys, which was a recycled fashion line taking discarded clothing from the Salvation Army Trading Company, and I was remodelling it into new fashions and selling it in various outlets across the UK and into Europe. My biggest contract was with Topshop, so it's very commercial fashion, and then eventually that led me to opening my own store in London as well, selling both mine and a number of other retailers that were looking at sustainable principles. Baby, it was my business, so I was very passionate about what I was doing, and that's where a lot of my early findings about the industry kind of grew. And then when the recession hit in 2009, because I was targeting that mid-market, it was an area that was really affected in the recession. So high end always does well, low end value people still buy, but it's that middle section of the industry that's always really difficult. So yeah, I found it very difficult to maintain a viable business. So that's when I really thought, how can I look to still develop and kind of bring awareness? And so that was where I felt that continuing my research really in a kind of more methodical way through a formalised PhD would give me the opportunity to explore other options for the industry. So my research now is looking at fallout fashion, so I'm looking at waste issues in manufacturing systems. I've been working with a manufacturing facility in Sri Lanka, as well as manufacturing facilities in the UK, different market levels and different sizes, to try and use design to embed systemic change into the system to make it less linear and bring in a circular element. So the whole idea is it's introducing the circular economy. So I'm taking items and kind of reintroducing them back into the system along the process, so that we don't have this idea of products being made, worn and then falling into landfill at the end.
What's your favourite fashion sustainable shops in the UK for people who listen to this and want to know more?
I think it's more brands that I would say I'd really get people to look out for. Christopher Rayburn is a menswear fashion brand who really carries out sustainable principles throughout his supply chain. He uses upcycled materials as well as organic materials, and does a lot of local workshops in his studios in Hackney, and he's got a retail outlet in the Carnaby area of Soho. So he's a fantastic kind of label to check out if you're into menswear. Women's wear, depending on kind of what your style is. I think if you like quite classic fashion, this is People Tree, and this is organic fair trade. So, you can get your kind of staple pieces as well as something that's a little bit more interesting and alternative. And then there's loads of emerging designers that are really exciting. People like Bethany Williams, who's just won the Emerging Talent Award for fashion. I think the best thing to do is, if you're really into sort of sustainable practices, is to start local, actually.
I spoke to Reed Amber, UK-based sustainable influencer.
My journey towards sustainability has been a very up and down one. I mean, I was brought up in a house where everything was saved and reused and recycled. We used to go car boot sailing, jumble sailing to get secondhand items all the time. So I was brought up in that atmosphere where it was acceptable and it was fun and it was enjoyable to find an item that you bought for 50p but, looks great on. You absolutely adore. I want to stand out and I want to feel unique and I want to be that person that people are like, oh my God, where did you get those jeans from? And I'm like, yeah, I found them from a charity shop. That's the exclusivity in my idea.
I spoke to Holly Hammer, founder of Rocket Children's Boutique in St Crispin's, Northampton.
Rocket Children's Boutique is a physical and an online store that sells clothes from age 0 to 12 years that are made of organic materials. They're ethically produced without compromising on fun. So they've got bright colours and bold print. So I think there's a real shift in thinking at the moment in society to thinking a lot more ethically. And thinking about where our food, where our clothes, where things we purchase come from. Thinking of the people involved in that process and of the environmental impact on the planet. Sustainability covers fair trade, fair working conditions, safe working conditions and pay. It's around the production process and how the fibres and the chemicals used affect the environment and the workers. It's also around the textile waste as well, so the amount that ends up in landfills. So at Rocket we use organic cotton for the majority of our items, so it'll all be organic but it's mostly cotton, and have a minimal impact on the environment. Because the items are better quality, better made, they will last longer than items made of different materials. So it goes back to the idea of buy cheap, buy twice. The clothes that we sell here at Rocket can be used as playwear, as best clothes. They will last, they will wear well, they will wash and they will wear extremely well, and they will last years. In terms of like trousers, they're designed so that they can be rolled up, rolled down, so they'll grow with your child. And so you're not spending out every few months money on clothes that is going to end up ultimately in a landfill site. And I think in Northampton in particular, with the physical store, we've seen so many big retailers close down. We've got very limited choice for children's clothing here. We're almost being driven to the cheap shops, the supermarkets, which, although they have their place, there's not that option really. If you want to go and see clothes in person, feel the quality, check the size against your child, because there's big variations of how clothes fit, and if you're ordering online you don't really know whether it's going to fit until it arrives. People might think I'm crackers opening up a physical shop in a time when lots of others are closing down. But the reason why I did it is because I feel so passionate about it. Because I want this. I would shop it. I created what I wanted to see in Northampton.
I spoke to Rhys an Edinburgh-based sustainable fashion influencer, freelance fashion journalist who has recently produced an article for Cosmopolitan magazine about fashion sustainability. Do you think fashion sustainability is accepted by journalists?
I do think journalists do care about sustainable fashion. There's sort of new headlines every single day. I've got like 1 million Google alerts set up. And it's really great to see it finally be talked about in mainstream media, because I guess when I first started writing about it, it felt like I was talking to a brick wall and people really didn't want to hear it. And there's obviously a lot of like bloggers and Instagrammers now as well. It's really kind of propelled into the mainstream. I guess the only problem is that there's a lot of weird relationships with advertisers and sort of more traditional publications within fast fashion. So there's only so much like a magazine can say. And, you know, I've had this experience myself having to redact like brand names from an article. And also I do think maybe some journalists are slightly lazy, you know, reading a press release and sort of regurgitating it as an article that's just advertising a brand. And there's a lot of like greenwashing that goes on when brands send out these press releases saying that they're all sustainable. So I do think they care, but perhaps some more education needs to happen to ensure that the truth is being told.
What drew you towards fashion sustainability?
I basically got into this sort of world because I was always interested in fashion from a really young age. The classic reading Vogue and shopping and sewing, and I always wanted to study fashion and work in fashion. I did lots of internships. And then I sort of discovered that this industry was much darker than I had previously thought. You know, I just thought it was very glamorous and fun. And then in 2013, the Rana Plaza disaster happened. And I remember where I was when I heard that news of a garment factory disaster happening and so much tragedy. And I just felt I couldn't be part of this problem, but I still really was passionate about the good that fashion can do.
Why is fashion sustainability important?
I kind of decided that instead of quitting on the dream and boycotting everything, it's more about the intersection of where fashion and sustainability meet and using fashion as part of this shift towards a world that's less environmentally destructive. And obviously with the climate emergency and so much news going on about that, we can sort of no longer ignore fashion's part to play as well. So I think sustainability in fashion is really important because, like I said, the climate emergency has been declared. Fashion is actually one of the biggest polluters. I think people kind of forget and they, you know, focus on perhaps like single-use plastics or oil or transport, but fashion has a huge impact. Saw some stat the other day that it's bigger than all international flights combined, and so sustainability is obviously needs to incorporate fashion. And for me as well, it's more than just the obvious environmental impacts. It needs to also be about kind of ethics, the ethical side, you know, the labour rights for cotton farmers and fair pay for garment workers, and also kind of issues like diversity and inclusivity and cultural sensitivity are all part of this new sustainable future of fashion as well. I mean, there's no fashion on a dead planet, and so we really need to start rewriting the narrative. And it's not just about like an afterthought of maybe like making an organic cotton t-shirt. It's about kind of shifting the entire business model throughout the industry.
I also spoke to Noreen, founder of Outside of Fashion.
So essentially it's a fashion brand focused on design for longevity, and of course with that, you know, hand in hand, you know, we're concerned with sustainability and also working in an ethical way. I started the business just over 10 years ago now, so we were really in that sort of first wave of businesses, you know, trying to evolve the fashion system at that time in the UK. Yeah, we focus on producing women's wear in a sort of timeless classic style, but with a gentle nod to trends, and it's really focused on versatility.
How hard is it to source sustainable fabrics?
So I definitely say it's easier now than it was 10 years ago when I started. 10 years ago when I started, it was really very niche, and there were only a few places that I could find to go to source the materials that I needed. So when I started the brand, I used organic cotton and hemp silk. And then I started quite soon after that using bamboo and merino wool and organic merino wool as well, where possible. And those are still a lot of the fabrics that I continue to use. But what's really exciting is now there's more and more innovative fabrics coming through. So I think anyone starting a brand now has a much easier time of it. I mean, if you look at exhibitions once a year, for example, there's Sustainable Angle. They do a special expo in January every year. And then even at Premier Vision in September, they always have a special area for kind of these smart textiles. So I think it's much, much easier now than it used to be.
Outside of Fashion has factories based in the UK, India and Macedonia. Why are they based there? And what is produced in each factory? Because I know they're in very different countries.
Basically, when I started, I was just working with one facility in India. And then over time, as I started to diversify the product, I had to look for other skills. So basically, each factory has a different skill and access to different fabrics. because initially that was something I was really conscious of. Is in the fashion industry, it's very common to kind of buy fabric in one part of the world, ship it all the way to another part of the world, and then you make something there, but then maybe you get buttons for somewhere else, and then you make it, and then it's sent again somewhere else, So there's a lot of kind of transportation involved just in making the things initially. It's something I've tried to look at. It's not perfect. It's very much a work in progress. But for example, in India, India's one of the biggest producers of organic cotton. So I make all my organic cotton shirt styles in India, and I work with a very small kind of, I wouldn't even call it a factory really, to be honest. It's more like a kind of a group of tailors that work together. The woman that I met when I was in India. In Macedonia, I work with a small family-run factory there. And they make a lot of the tailored wool styles that you see on my website. And again, they have that specific skill, and they're based sort of within Europe, so at least it's minimising the transportation. Because my wool fabric is coming from Italy. In London, I normally do the sort of jersey styles, and I use fabric that I source from a UK supplier.
What is the future of fashion for you personally or as a brand?
For me, it's quite simple. We know that, I think it's sort of common knowledge at this point, at least with people in this sphere, that, we need to change the fashion system. The current fashion system is broken, and it doesn't work for sustainability. So I think it's really about evolving and finding new ways of working. So I think that could mean that we rent more of our wardrobe, or we share more of it. I think we also need to be thinking more about repairing and really valuing and enjoying the things that we have. And I think it can also be looking at how we develop more slow, kind of smaller, localized systems for fashion design and making. I think there's actually so much potential, and it can actually be a really exciting time for fashion. But obviously, when you have to make big changes, that takes time. But I do think the future of fashion should be much more varied and a lot slower.
I spoke to Selena, founder of Recloseted, which is a sustainable fashion platform.
We're on a mission to right the harmful fashion industry. So what that looks like is we help launch and scale sustainable fashion brands, and then we also help existing fashion brands become more sustainable. So there's a lot of business work that we do. And then on the other side, I also like to educate and empower and inform consumers. So we do a lot of education and awareness raising through our various platforms.
So I understand that you have a brand launch program as well to help other brands. What is it?
Yeah, so our consulting services, basically there's a few things we offer for sustainable fashion founders. The first thing we offer is a one-time consultation. So let's say someone just has one or two issues that they're currently struggling with, and then they just needed like a quick touch point. So that's available for people, like a more touch and go kind of thing. And then on the other end, I also do have comprehensive programs I work through with my clients. So one of them, to your point, is the brand launch program. So this takes an idea of starting a brand and really turns it into conception and turns it into reality. So in that program, I work with clients on product development. So we source sustainable materials. I help them find ethical and conscious manufacturers. And then once the product is developed and we've, created something great, then I help them with the business as well. So we help them with the financials, their marketing strategy, their sales strategy, their distribution, their social media, their website.
I contacted fast fashion brands like Boohoo, Missguided, Pretty Little Thing and Primark. None of them answered my calls. I'm in Primark walking around. First thing I see, black dress for £12 rathan material. Carry on walking along, bag for £10, like a big bag for laptops and stuff to go in. Long maxi summer dress for £15. blazer is around about £20 for all of them. £15 to £20, thin material, multicolour, some with belts. Leggings anywhere from £5 to £7. I was not surprised any of the fast fashion companies didn't want to answer my questions. I'm asking questions they simply do not want to hear. As many people I've spoke to while making this documentary have said, fashion, like any industry, has a dark side to it. At the beginning of this, I believe sustainable fashion was made as another marketing tool to help big fashion brands. But through this experience, I have learned that it is a new and flourishing industry. And, as a 21-year-old in 2020, a new industry is not something you come across every day.